I was already halfway down the hallway before I even realized I'd left my backpack sitting next to my desk. My heart was beating so hard I could actually hear it over everyone talking between classes. I kept replaying the last 2 minutes in my head, trying to convince myself I had somehow imagined everything. Maybe another school used the same classroom numbers. Maybe another teacher happened to sound exactly like ours. Maybe I was just looking for connections because I'd been thinking about her nonstop for 8 months. But the second I reached the door with the same room number from the reflection, every excuse disappeared. I looked through the narrow window in the classroom door, and the world honestly felt like it froze. She was sitting 3 rows from the back, wearing the same oversized hoodie she'd worn in a dozen pictures she'd sent me. Her hair covered part of her face exactly the way it always had on our calls. I knew that hoodie. I knew that backpack leaning against her desk because she'd once complained one of the zippers was broken. The only difference was that instead of being hundreds of miles away like she'd always claimed, she was sitting less than 50 feet from me. My phone was still pressed against my ear, and I heard my own breathing coming through the speaker before she slowly looked toward the door. The second our eyes met, every bit of color drained from her face. She didn't even hesitate. The call disconnected instantly. Her phone disappeared into her backpack, and she stared at me with the same terrified expression someone would have after getting caught doing something they never expected anyone to discover. I couldn't even move. The girl sitting behind me in English every single day was somehow also the girl I'd spent every night talking to for 8 months. Before I could process anything, another student walked past me in the hallway and asked why I was standing there like I'd seen a ghost. I snapped out of it and walked away before she came outside because I honestly had no idea what I was supposed to say. The rest of the day became one long attempt to catch up with her, but somehow she stayed one step ahead every single time. When the lunch bell rang, her usual seat in the cafeteria stayed empty. When math ended, she slipped out before I could even pack my notebook. During chemistry, she asked to leave early, and by the time the bell rang, she had already disappeared into the hallway. Every message I sent showed as delivered but never opened. Every call went straight to voicemail. Then, about an hour after school ended, I got one text. It only said, "I'm sorry." Nothing else. I answered immediately, asking what she was sorry for, asking why she'd lied, asking why she'd pretended to live in another state when we literally shared the same schedule 5 days a week. She never replied. That night was the first night in 8 months she didn't call. My phone stayed completely silent. I barely slept because every memory we'd shared suddenly felt different. Every excuse she'd made for not meeting suddenly sounded fake. Every blurry picture made sense. Every time she'd angled her camera toward a wall or ceiling instead of her face, suddenly felt planned instead of awkward. I kept opening old messages looking for clues I'd somehow missed, and once I knew the truth, they were everywhere. She'd always known exactly when our school had random days off without me telling her first. She somehow always knew when I had football games canceled because of weather. She'd ask how I thought I did on quizzes before I even mentioned having one. At the time, I thought it was just lucky timing. Now I realized she hadn't been guessing anything. She'd been sitting in the same building watching everything happen. The next morning, I got to school early, hoping I'd finally get answers. But when I walked into English, her desk was empty. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Right before attendance, she quietly slipped into the room with her head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept at all. She sat behind me without saying a single word. I could actually feel her staring at the back of my head during class, but every time I turned around, she'd already be looking at her notebook. The tension was so obvious that even our teacher asked if something was wrong because neither of us answered a single question all period. When the bell rang, I stood up before she could leave, but she grabbed her backpack so fast she nearly knocked her chair over and rushed toward the hallway. I followed her through 2 different buildings before she disappeared into the crowd again. By lunchtime, I was frustrated, confused, and honestly starting to feel hurt more than angry. 8 months wasn't a joke. We'd shared birthdays, family problems, late-night conversations, stupid inside jokes, and plans we'd made for the future. I'd trusted someone I thought I knew better than almost anyone else. Now it felt like every memory had been built on a lie. I decided if she wouldn't talk to me during school, I'd wait after school. When the final bell rang, I stayed near the student parking lot where almost everyone had to pass before leaving campus. 20 minutes later, I finally saw her walking alone with her hood pulled over her head. The second she noticed me, she stopped walking completely. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then I slowly walked toward her, and before I could say a single word, I saw tears already running down her face. I knew whatever explanation she had was finally about to change everything. She looked like she wanted to run again, but this time she didn't. She just stood there, gripping the straps of her backpack so tightly her knuckles turned white. Before I could ask anything, she started crying so hard she could barely breathe, and people walking past us kept staring before deciding to mind their own business. She finally admitted the one thing I never expected to hear. She had known exactly who I was from the very first day we started talking online. She'd recognized my profile picture because it was the same one I used on a school club page. She said she'd created a new account to message me after spending months being too scared to ever talk to me in person. She thought if she messaged me as a stranger, I'd get to know her without already seeing her as the quiet, weird girl from English. At first, it sounded ridiculous, but the more she explained, the more every lie connected to another one. She lied about living hours away because she didn't want me suggesting we meet. She always called late at night because she knew I couldn't accidentally see her around school while we were talking. She kept the lights dim during video calls, covered half her face with hoodies, blankets, or her hair. And whenever I asked to see her completely, she'd laugh it off and blame strict parents or being embarrassed. Every excuse had been carefully planned months before I ever questioned it. She admitted she'd almost confessed dozens of times, but every week that passed made it harder because she thought I'd leave the second I realized she'd lied from the beginning. The guilt in her voice actually made me feel bad. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't acting manipulative. She looked completely broken. For a few minutes, I honestly thought the whole situation was just one huge mistake caused by insecurity. I told her she should have trusted me instead of making up an entire fake life. She nodded through tears and promised there weren't any more secrets. She kept repeating that she only wanted a real chance because she believed nobody ever noticed girls like her. I actually believed her. We agreed to take things slowly and figure everything out honestly this time. Walking home, I remember thinking maybe the craziest part of the story was already over. I couldn't have been more wrong. The very next day, one of the girls from my history class asked if she could talk to me privately before school started. We'd barely spoken before, so I figured maybe she needed homework or something. Instead, she looked around to make sure nobody else was close enough to hear us and quietly asked if I was really dating the girl from my English class. I told her we'd been talking online and had just figured everything out. Her expression immediately changed from confused to uncomfortable. She hesitated for a second before saying she'd almost asked me out months earlier, but changed her mind after getting several anonymous messages telling her to stay away because I already had a girlfriend who got jealous easily. My stomach dropped. I asked who sent them, but she said the account disappeared almost immediately after she blocked it. Before I could even process that, another classmate walked by, overheard part of the conversation, and casually said, "Wait, I thought everyone knew you already had a girlfriend." I asked where he'd heard that, and he shrugged, saying people had been saying it for months. Suddenly, memories I hadn't thought about in forever started crashing back into my head. A girl from art class who used to smile at me every morning had randomly stopped talking to me halfway through the semester. Another girl who kept asking to partner with me during labs suddenly switched seats without explanation. Someone I'd been texting for a group project abruptly became cold and distant after acting interested for weeks. At the time, I figured I'd imagined the signals or they had simply lost interest. Now, every one of those moments felt different. By lunch, another friend quietly admitted he'd heard rumors that any girl who got too close to me would cause problems. Nobody knew where the rumors started. They just spread until people accepted them as fact. My chest felt tight because the timing lined up perfectly with when I'd started dating my online girlfriend. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to convince myself it couldn't all be connected. Maybe people were exaggerating. Maybe it was coincidence. Then, right before the last bell, another girl I barely knew stopped me in the hallway and apologized for believing an anonymous message she'd received months earlier, claiming I secretly laughed at girls behind their backs after pretending to like them. She admitted she'd avoided me ever since because she thought I was playing games with people. I stood there completely speechless. That wasn't one rumor anymore. That was a pattern. And deep down, I already knew exactly who I needed to confront next. I didn't even wait until the next day. The second school ended, I went looking for her, and this time I found her before she could disappear into the crowd. The moment she saw my face, she knew something had happened because the smile she'd started to force immediately vanished. I asked one question. "How many people did you message?" She froze. She didn't even try pretending she didn't know what I meant. She just looked down at the sidewalk and stayed silent so long that the silence became my answer. When she finally admitted she'd sent the messages, it wasn't one or two girls like I'd hoped. It was almost every girl she thought might be interested in me over the past year. Some got anonymous accounts telling them I already had a serious girlfriend. Others were told I wasn't interested and was only being polite. A few were warned that I flirted with everyone for attention. She even admitted she'd intentionally interrupt conversations whenever she saw me talking to someone new at school because she was terrified I'd connect with someone in real life and stop answering her messages at night. I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. The weirdest part was that she wasn't smiling or acting proud. She looked completely convinced she'd done the right thing. She kept saying she wasn't trying to ruin anyone's life. She just wanted to protect what the two of us already had. She said she knew lying was wrong, but every time another girl smiled at me, she panicked and convinced herself she'd lose me forever if she didn't do something first. I told her there had never been a relationship to protect because she'd built it on lies from the beginning. That was the first time she looked angry instead of guilty. She insisted our feelings had been real even if the circumstances weren't. She kept saying 8 months couldn't just disappear because of a few mistakes. A few mistakes. Hearing her describe months of manipulation like it was a small misunderstanding made something click in my head. I wasn't talking to someone who simply regretted lying. I was talking to someone who still believed everything she'd done was justified. I told her we were done and started walking away, but she followed me across the parking lot, crying so loudly that people turned to watch. I thought that would finally be the end of it. It wasn't even close. The next morning, she was waiting outside my first period classroom before I arrived. She acted like nothing had happened and tried handing me my favorite energy drink because she'd noticed I was always tired on Mondays. I walked past without taking it. At lunch, she somehow ended up sitting only a few seats away even though she'd never eaten in that section before. 2 days later, my English teacher announced we'd have assigned seats for a group activity, and somehow she convinced another student to switch so she could sit directly behind me again. Every time I turned around, she was already looking at me. If I left class early, she'd appear in the hallway a minute later. If I stayed after school for a club meeting, she'd be waiting outside the building pretending she just happened to be walking by. It got so predictable that my friends started joking she had better timing than the school bell. They laughed because they thought she just had a crush. They didn't know she'd already spent 8 months secretly controlling parts of my life. Then things got even worse. She stopped hiding that we weren't together anymore. Instead, she started acting like we still were. If another girl asked me a question, she'd suddenly appear beside us before I could answer. If someone complimented my shoes or hoodie, she'd casually interrupt with, "He already has someone." More than once I heard her introduce herself to people as my girlfriend, even though I'd ended everything days earlier. Every time I corrected her, she'd look hurt and quietly tell people we were just going through a rough patch. That lie spread almost as fast as the old rumors had. Some classmates believed her. Others looked confused because they'd never even known we were talking in the first place. I felt trapped inside a relationship I'd already ended. The final straw came during lunch one Friday when a girl from chemistry asked if I wanted to join her lab group for an upcoming project. Before I could answer, my ex walked straight between us, grabbed my arm, and asked why I hadn't answered her texts all morning like the other girl wasn't even standing there. The cafeteria went completely quiet around us. People who had never paid attention before suddenly stopped eating just to watch what was happening. I pulled my arm away immediately, but she grabbed it again even tighter and started crying, insisting I was embarrassing her in front of everyone. At that moment, I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own, and if I didn't create as much distance as possible, it was only going to keep getting worse. I left the cafeteria without even eating, and for the rest of the afternoon, I stayed around teachers whenever I could because I honestly didn't know what she'd do next. By then, almost everyone had noticed something was going on. People kept asking if we'd broken up, while others insisted we were still together because she'd been telling anyone who would listen that we were simply having a fight. I stopped trying to explain the whole story because every time I did, it somehow reached her before the end of the day. Instead, I blocked her on every app we had ever used. Our chats disappeared from the top of my phone for the first time in 8 months, and even though it hurt, I knew it had to happen. That night, she made 3 new accounts to message me. I blocked those too. The next morning, she tried emailing me through our school accounts. Blocked. By lunch, she was asking mutual classmates to tell me she just wanted 5 minutes to explain. I refused every time. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. I wanted my normal life back. She didn't seem to understand that every new attempt only convinced me I'd made the right decision. The following week, my English teacher quietly moved my seat after noticing she kept trying to get my attention during class instead of doing her work. She looked completely shocked when she walked in and saw me sitting on the opposite side of the room. She asked if she could switch seats with someone, but the teacher immediately said no. It was the first time someone else had stepped in without me saying anything, and I could tell she wasn't used to hearing the word no. For a few days, things became quieter, and I honestly thought maybe she was finally accepting reality. Then everything exploded during a school assembly. I was sitting with my class when another girl from my history group sat beside me because the seats around us were full. We weren't flirting. We were literally talking about an assignment due the next day. Halfway through the assembly, I noticed my ex standing near the aisle staring directly at us. At first, I thought she'd just walk away. Instead, she marched over in front of hundreds of students and demanded to know why I was replacing her already. The entire section went silent. Before I could even answer, she started crying, saying she'd done everything for me, given up everything for me, protected our relationship when nobody else would, and now I was throwing her away for the first girl who smiled at me. Students all around us turned to watch. Teachers rushed over because she was crying so hard she could barely stand. She kept reaching toward me, but I backed away every time. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I just wanted out of the situation. Eventually, she had to be escorted out of the assembly because she couldn't calm down, and for the first time, everyone saw the behavior I'd been dealing with behind the scenes for weeks. The rumors stopped almost overnight because people finally understood why I'd been avoiding her. After that day, she stopped waiting outside my classes. She stopped interrupting conversations. She stopped pretending we were still together. We barely spoke for the rest of the semester. I transferred to a different seat permanently, kept my distance, and focused on my friends instead of my phone. A few months later, I started talking to someone else, but this time everything was real. We met face to face first. No fake stories, no hidden identities, no excuses about cameras or distance, just honesty from day one. Looking back now, I don't think the biggest lie was pretending she lived somewhere else. The biggest lie was convincing herself that controlling people was the same thing as loving them. For a while, I actually felt guilty because I knew her fear of rejection was real, but fear doesn't excuse manipulating other people or deciding who they're allowed to talk to. I still hope she got the help she needed and learned from everything that happened because nobody deserves to live with that much insecurity. As for me, I learned one lesson I'll probably never forget. If someone has to build an entire relationship on lies just to keep you, then they aren't protecting the relationship at all. They're protecting the fantasy they created in their own head, and eventually that fantasy always falls apart.